Hello, my beautiful lady gardens, and welcome to our first of many, many interviews and introductions to some of the most phenomenal women that I have had the privilege of crossing paths with. And I wanted to say now to these women, you have touched my soul and made an impact on who I am as a person. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your vulnerabilities, your real truths, your knowledge, and your grace with me and my lady garden horticulturist. But before we embark on a truly phenomenal story of strength and resilience, I wanted to share an experience with you that I had today. And it got me thinking, why do we save our praises for another time? We sing our praises for someone to others, but forget to actually tell the person we're praising. Today, I was told that a beautiful woman that I had met 10 months ago had passed away. I was shocked. I was shocked and I was saddened to hear that such a young light was no longer in this world. But what also saddened me was that I wasn't able to share with her how much of a profound impact she had had on me in just our 2 meetings. I often thought to myself in the past 8 months of making another appointment with her, and I wanted to acknowledge to her the gift that she had given me in her wisdom and her energy the months before. I had told numerous people with gratitude about her, and yet I hadn't gotten to share this with the person who was meant to receive it. So I wanted to take the opportunity now to thank her. Thank you for sharing your vision of my future with me and allowing a space for me to dream big with the energy that you provided me. I am beyond grateful. And here I am doing what you said I would do. You truly touched my heart and my soul in just those 2 meetings. So, ladies, don't save your thank yous. They belong in the here and the now. And with that, I would like to say a massive thank you to you, my guest, Sam, my beautiful friend and the very first woman to feature in a released interview on High Tea with Lady V. You are a pillar of strength, love, determination, and pure freaking awesomeness. I admire you endlessly and respect you deeply. Thank you for bringing your raw, real, and most authentic self to this space and sharing it with the world. I am forever grateful to know you, and just so you know, you're stuck with me for life. You'll never get rid of me. So with that, it's my honor to introduce you to the amazing, amazing Samantha James. Sam is the owner and founder of Fierce PT. With over 30 years experience in personal training, she has worked across London, South Africa, Sydney, Canberra, managing global fitness operations and developing thousands of personal trainers. Sam has helped countless women navigate the various stages of their health and aging. But when she began her own journey to pregnancy, it unexpectedly led her into early menopause. And this marks the beginning of a tumultuous path to reclaiming herself and finding her normal again. Sam, welcome to High Tea with Lady V. Sam, I'm honored to have you on and to share your journey with us.
Thanks, Kate. I really appreciate being here. And as you know, I am super passionate about helping other women not experience what I went through, and also sharing this journey because I think for so long I just tried to deal with it all myself.
So tell us where it started. You were 34. I can't believe you were 34. You were married and you're trying to have a baby and it wasn't working. You'd been trying for 6 months. Tell us about that path and that journey into the decision of having IVF.
The decision of IVF, I was a little bit reluctant to start off with because at the time my previous husband and I hadn't been trying for very long. We'd literally been trying to have a baby for 6 months, and we both had really busy jobs in Sydney.
So there's a lot of stress involved.
There was a lot of stress involved and not a lot of downtime. We did all the testing with regards to the IVF process, and it was kind of unexplained infertility. My entire junior years, from menstruation all the way through to me emigrating from Africa to Australia, I'd always, every single year, had gynecological checkups. Our system's quite different there, so we have checkups annually, and I'd had cameras inserted, etc. And my
It seems like some pretty good testing happening over there as well.
It was really extensive, which is why I never really thought I would go on this journey, to be honest. My gynecologist was always like, yep, you're good to go.
You're fine.
You're fine. You're going to have a football family kind of thing. I had never had any complications or any symptoms prior to going through my IVF. Went through IVF and I was really, really ill almost from the get-go.
Before you started it, what did they actually tell you? What was that onboarding session like?
It wasn't very personable, to be honest. It was almost more like a sales pitch.
Yeah.
It wasn't something of comfort. It was more like, well, this is what's going on. This is what we can do for you. Are you in or out?
Yeah.
We went to a very well-renowned clinic and facility in the CBD of Sydney, and the specialist was there with literally a piece of paper explaining exactly what was going on and what could be done and how we would need to get started. We were promised all this support, etc., which basically didn't happen, especially once I started getting sick. It was pretty astounding. I'm a pretty strong person in terms of personality, and it was probably one of the hardest times I've ever been through, to be honest.
Yeah, we were talking about whether they had discussed prior to you starting IVF, if they talked to you about your egg count. You said no, you hadn't had that mentioned, which is surprising, and that they didn't understand why you weren't able to fall pregnant. And I think some of that messaging too, it always falls back onto the female. Like, why can't you get pregnant? As opposed to what's happening with your partner, what's happening with you together. Let's actually discuss and see if there's something genetically happening. I feel like there's not a lot of that talk that happens prior to that.
Yeah, I guess for us there wasn't that. And as I say, whatever testing was done,
they haven't really consulted a lot about what the testing results were.
No, and again, it was all unexplained infertility.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, can't find anything in both you guys. It just seems like it's unexplained infertility. You're good to go. Let's give this a try.
And then during the process, tell me a little bit about that. You mentioned that you got quite sick and you felt very overstimulated. And you did speak to your doctor about that. What was her response?
So when I say overstimulated, I'm talking about my body felt like it was going to explode. My skin, the only way I can describe it is that it almost felt that there was too much helium, like a balloon, being pumped through my system, and I was going to explode all over the walls of my office. I couldn't bend any of my joints.
So you're going through a really inflammatory reaction.
Oh, massive. And then as well as that, the nausea came. I was getting literally sick in the bin in my office. And then I had all this hot and cold shivering, and I was literally sweating. And I remember almost wanting to crawl under my desk and hide, and I was like, it's too hard. Can I really do this? I was really, really sick. And I remember calling my husband at the time and letting him know exactly what was happening. And he was really dismissive of me. And then I called the specialist and I said to her, once I eventually managed to get hold of her, which was a whole process in itself, I said, look, I'm at work. I am not feeling well. This has been going on for a few days. I've left it. I've tried to deal with it until I've called you. And I feel absolutely wildly sick. my body feels like it's about to explode. And her response was literally in these words, Samantha, you need to suck it up. How badly do you want a child?
That is heartbreaking. And I cannot believe that you weren't offered any support. You weren't offered any kind of follow-up to see what was actually happening with your body. Because not being able to bend your fingers, that's a huge inflammatory response of the body happening there. Are you getting fluid retention? Do you need to have tablets that help get rid of fluid in the body? I cannot believe that from that moment she didn't say, let's just do some tests. Let's see what's happening here.
That's exactly what my concern was. And as I say, I was completely shut down when I did try and ask the questions. I was also very vulnerable.
They've not followed up with you. She hasn't given you any response to what you were going through. Had she said that they would be normal symptoms? Had you been told about the symptoms of what was normal and what wasn't?
To be honest, no. It was more, well, this is your personal journey. This is your personal experience of what's happening. But there was never any comfort given to me in any way. And the response that my body had and the way I was so dramatically sick wasn't normal. I didn't feel normal. I didn't feel right. There was moments where I honestly felt that I just couldn't cope and I couldn't continue with this process. It was the most challenging time of my life. The honest truth, the IVF experience for me was so traumatic that if I was offered $1 billion and told that I would go through the procedure again, my answer would be no. It left me that sick, and for the last 16 years, the repercussions that I've had from my experience have been that traumatic and that chronic.
They've been life-changing. It's been completely life-changing for you. And I feel that there is a lot that the medical system loves to place on women that just go, it's normal, it's your normal, so you need to go through it. As opposed to having a listen to a woman's problems and what is actually occurring in her body and think to themselves, okay, she's on all these hormones at the moment. She's experiencing this and this. As you said, is this being overstimulated? Is something else happening here? Are you having an inflammatory reaction? Yet none of those things were taken into account, and you're just told as a woman, suck it up, it's normal.
That's exactly right. Since then, I suppose with my own experience, and I have trained a lot of women in my time, and I have mentored a lot of trainers who've trained women who've been through these processes. There is a lot of that. You need to just suck it up.
Suck it up. It's normal. You said you went through 2 rounds of IVF. When was the decision made to stop? And then what happened after that?
Well, basically, I became really ill quite rapidly after the 2nd round of IVF. I was also in a very tumultuous, abnormal marriage, unfortunately. So I almost went through IVF by myself in the end because my husband at the time became unsupportive of the whole process once I think he saw what was involved.
Yeah.
And our marriage broke down and I became one sick ball of a mess.
My goodness. So you are coming out of IVF, your hormones are all over the place. So you've got no idea what's happening with your body and your marriage breaks down.
Pretty much.
That would have been a really, really tough time for you. And I know you mentioned to me your first major incident that you knew something was really wrong was you started to get vertigo.
Yeah. Vertigo literally hit me like a tornado or a cyclone or one of the worst weather storms that you can actually predict with no warning. I had come home from work that night, had some dinner, and then I just started to feel a little bit off. And I was like, oh, I don't feel great. Thought maybe I was getting some form of a stomach bug or 24 hours, something like that. I mean, when you work in large gyms,
Yes.
you do kind of pick up lots and lots of different things. Went to bed that night. I remember getting up, going to the bathroom, and it was about 11:30, and I was stumbling like I was intoxicated. I was not stable on my feet. I was literally falling over myself, and then I was crawling on the floor because I couldn't stand up. So I was crawling on my hands and knees because every time I tried to stand up, the whoosh of
it is the worst.
Oh,
Yes.
I was so dizzy and so disorientated. And I remember just collapsing on the bathroom floor. And then an ambulance was called for me. And they came and said to me, look, we've got to take you to hospital. And I was like, everyone's just overreacting. I've got a stomach bug. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
They said to me, you could be having a stroke, like with what's your symptoms are presenting.
Yes.
So we just want to go and have you checked out. Long story short, some testing was done and it was vertigo. And I had vertigo for 1 year.
And you still had to go to work?
I still had to go to work, absolutely. I still had to show up. I still had to train people. I still had to do my job and all my management responsibilities. I never missed a day of work, but I was one sick girl.
Wow. And because vertigo too, it's internal. You can't see it. You don't know that behind someone's smile is this whirling head or not being able to stand up properly. It takes every ounce of energy to just function. I know when I've had it before and I'm like, I cannot move. Please, nobody move me. Don't.
Really scary ride, right?
Yeah. And I had it for a couple of days, not a year.
Yeah.
Like, that's wild. And now what we're finding out too in all the research is perimenopause, vertigo is one of the symptoms.
Right. And, you know, this whole piece of puzzle has just come together for me only recently. So for 16 years, once you hear my journey, I've had every single symptom under the sun, which I'm sure we will cover today, but it's all just come together like a puzzle. There was this amazing event that went on at the Sydney Opera House about 2 weeks ago, and all these really learned doctors who have been so open with their journeys and their experiences. And then they're mentioning all these symptoms that are all related to perimenopause and lack of estrogen. And I'm just like, are you kidding?
This is everything you've been through.
This is just everything and more that I've been through. And this is just because of low estrogen.
When did you start getting some other symptoms and realizing that you were going into early menopause?
Well, then everything just started hitting me like a train. It was like an absolute train crash. After the vertigo, the next thing was all the dizziness, lots and lots of vomiting. My emotions changed. So a lot of crying and then a lot of anger and then the whole disorientation. I always felt disorientated. I had a lot of brain fog. I'd find myself walking somewhere with purpose and thinking, right, I need to do this. And then I'd get there and I'd be like,
you're like, what the fuck am I doing here?
What the hell? What do I need? What's going on? And I started to get really worried. I thought, oh my God, I'm losing my head. Yeah. And then I started to lose my hair. I would shower and my hair was literally coming out in these clumps. And I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? But the scariest thing for me was actually all the internal feelings that I knew my body was not right, that I knew I was feeling so not myself. I'm the person who usually wakes up at 5 o'clock and I jump out of bed and I'm excited for the day and I have lots of energy. And I have enough energy to motivate me throughout the day until when I get home at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I love exercise and I love helping people. And everything was just changing. I was starting to doubt myself. I was reclining into my own body. I was almost nervous to even cross the street by myself because I didn't know if I'd make it. Am I going the right way? Am I dizzy? Am I going to collapse in the street? I was like a shell with not myself in that shell.
And how old were you at this time?
So this started from the age of 34 and progressively by the age of, say, 36, 38, 40, that is when my struggles became huge. And that is when I started seeking help and didn't even know where to go. I started at my GP, put me onto some synthetic kind of hormone, and that was a recipe for disaster.
Probably the pill.
That was exactly right. Again, my body does not cope well with anything synthetic. And this whole water retention thing started again. And my body just blew up and I literally gained 9 kilos of fluid within days.
Yeah. And that is so dangerous. It's not just some symptom, that is a really dangerous symptom.
I couldn't bend my fingers. I couldn't bend down. Couldn't put my shoes on. I remember that everything felt tight. My uniform was tight on me. And at that point, I was training a client who I'd been training for probably 13 years, and she was a doctor. And we used to have a session every single week in Bondi. And I remember calling her up and I was sobbing on the phone and I said, look, I'm so sorry to have to hassle you, but I am not well. And told her my situation. I met her at the gym that morning and there happened to be a pharmacy across the way from the gym that I worked at the time. And she wrote me a script immediately, told me to come off those tablets immediately and gave me something to help release all the water and the fluid. Yeah. And that was another frightening experience because I couldn't get back in to see my own GP for a number of days and weeks. So what would I have done?
What would you have done? Exactly. And then you get this real mistrust of the medical system, or you do actually start to believe that it's in your head. You're like, is this something that I'm making up? Because you have doctors saying to you, it's normal, you're fine. It's actually nothing. That shouldn't happen. And it did happen. And did your IVF doctor ever come back to you with any of the symptoms and say anything?
Nothing. There was no follow-up. Once you were out their system, you were literally out the system.
And there were no tests after the IVF?
Nothing.
Nothing. So nothing to just check where your egg count was, what might have been happening, nothing.
No.
Like, didn't work, see you later, you're off on your merry way and you're 35 at this time.
Yep, pretty much.
That's insane. And at around 40, when you are looking for answers, did you end up finding anybody that actually helped you?
Well, I was really, really desperate by then because I started getting sicker and sicker. So all the symptoms that I've been explaining when I say the brain fog and the tearfulness, and it wasn't just, a few tears running down my eyes. It was literally the whole Bridget Jones smashing my steering wheel. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to face the world?
And especially for someone who has always been so mentally strong and resilient as well, that would have been a real, what's happening here? What is wrong with me?
Yeah, and I used to get all these people, even those closest to me at the time, they'd be, well, what's going on with you? You're meant to be fit. You're meant to be healthy. Surely you should know what to do with yourself. And I found that really frustrating as well.
Yes.
And pretty heartbreaking.
Because you don't have a PhD in hormones either. And you've gone to the doctors, you've told them you're feeling this.
I went to see an endocrinologist. I was referred to one and she took one look at me and she literally just shook her head and she said to me, I don't know how you're walking around. She looked at my blood tests and all the other tests that I had done previous to going to see her.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I'm really sorry, but your case is now pretty complex. The way it was explained to me was that I had been so overstimulated because at this stage I didn't even know it was due to the IVF.
Yeah, okay. And so you hadn't really even been warned of what symptoms to watch out for after IVF?
No. So it was, well, actually what's happened is you've been so overstimulated that if you think about like a microwave, when you put something toxic in a microwave that shouldn't be in there and it blows up, that's exactly what your insides have done. They are fried.
Yeah.
So you have got no testosterone in your body, you have got zero estrogen, and you have got zero progesterone. So how you even functioning, I don't know. Her response was, you really need to be going to see a professor of hormones because this is out of my scope of practice.
At least she was honest. She was talking to her saying,
100%.
this is what's happened. She could see what had happened. And she's like, if you'd come to me 2 years earlier, she might have been able to do something. But now it had gotten to this point where she was obviously concerned and couldn't help you.
That's right. So, in a way, again, I was grateful for that, but frustrated. And I remember leaving.
I bet. Because now you're like, I'm leaving another office with no answers.
No answers.
Yeah.
You know, lots of money going out the window.
Oh, yeah.
And again, no answers, no help, nothing to do immediately where I could start to have this journey of feeling better. And then by then, I had started these chronic night sweats.
Yeah.
And when I say night sweats, the only way I can describe it is if you have a hole in your ceiling and you have a major storm and your roof leaks. And that's literally every single night what my bed looked like.
I remember you showing me a photo and I was blown away. I was like, you must be so dehydrated.
And that's another thing. Yes, you're having these immense night sweats, which are so distressing because you're having to get up and have a shower, change your sheets, change your bedding because you can't lie and all of that. And then, boom, it happens a couple of hours later.
It's affecting your sleep. It's affecting everything.
And then on the subject of sleep, and I started getting insomnia.
And has anyone at any point said to you, you might be in menopause or perimenopause?
Still at this stage, no.
Wow.
No, so I can't sleep. I've literally got to be up between 4:30 and 5 in the morning. My work basically was long hours. I had no sleep. I was running on empty. I then eventually got an appointment with the professor, and the waiting game for that was months.
Yeah.
That wasn't just like walk out the door and get another appointment and you'll be fine in a week.
Yeah. And what kills me with this too is you finally get in for your appointment and they go, oh, okay, well, we can't really do anything until we see your blood test. It's like, oh my goodness, can we not get the blood test done first? Should there not be some triage system where what tests do you need to make an informed decision or an informed first consultation? It's just wild. And you're already $500 deep for the consultation when they go, yeah, I'm not really sure. Let's get some tests done.
That's right. And you're telling the same story over and over and over again, you know. And psychologically, that is really tough too.
Yes.
Because you're living or reliving this whole process the whole time, which you have to. I mean, these people don't know you from the bar, so. But then you become also really kind of disheartened.
I'm sure you're disengaged too. You start to be a bit disengaged in the process because you're like, oh, it's this and it's this and it's this and it's this. And they're probably looking at going, is it really? Have you just read something? But you've said them so many times and you've lived it for the last, we're at 5 or 6 years now. You've lived it for that long. You're disengaged in your own healthcare.
I used to get, well, you know, you're quite young to be experiencing all of these kind of things. When I used to say to my GP, I can't sleep at night, I have got chronic insomnia, I'd be told, well, have you tried to have a cup of nice, like, herbal tea?
Herbal tea.
I mean, hello? I wanted to pour the pot of tea on their head.
Yeah.
Like,
And put yourself in an ice bath.
exactly. Like, I have just told you my whole story.
And you're telling me to have a sucking cup of tea.
Telling me to have a cup of herbal tea.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So it did. It became really disheartening. And then a lot of anxiety started setting in. I started to feel so anxious because at night I knew I wasn't going to sleep. Or at night I knew I'd have a highly disruptive sleep where these chronic night sweats would happen. Or when I went into the shower and washed my hair, I knew clumps of hair would fall out.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
My anxiety, and I'm not even an anxious person, started to become really prevalent.
Yeah.
But going back to the hormone doctor, when eventually we did do exactly what you said and got to the blood tests and got another appointment and did that whole beautiful cycle, he said to me exactly the same thing. He said, look, I don't know how you're walking around because your body is on empty.
Yeah.
We went through the whole microwave blown up system again, and my insides are frazzled, and forget ever having the opportunity of having a child because that's been taken away from you now.
That would be heartbreaking. You had a new partner now. You're moved your life somewhere else because you've met somebody, and then now you're being told, no, you can't have children.
Yeah. And so again, the whole psychological battle of making peace, I guess, with all of that.
Yeah. Especially the journey that you've come to. And then finally someone 5 to 10 years later is saying, oh, actually, you've been on this journey the whole time and you can't have kids now. That would have been really hard.
Yeah, it was. It was heartbreaking.
I bet. I'm getting teary for you. You know, that's just the medical system letting you down so badly when you've been asking for help. Yeah.
I think I'm all cried out, to be honest. Like, usually I'm so emotional about all these things. I think I'm so passionate about being strong now for other women.
Yes.
And being there to support them. That it's not about me anymore. It's about, like, not letting other women go through what I went through. There's days when, as you say, I do cry tears still because I'm like, why did I have to endure all these kind of things? It shouldn't have been this way.
No, it shouldn't have been.
But anyway, there's a time, like I've always got a saying, it's always be better, not bitter.
Yes.
I always want to try and be better with my experience and never live in a bitter state because, you know, those weren't the cards that I've been dealt. And I'm very blessed now. I've got 2 beautiful stepchildren.
You do. You do. They are beautiful kids.
You know, the journey has been one of absolute trauma.
It would have been. And so you've gone to this doctor. Sorry, I've digressed you from that. You've gone to the professor. You've had the bloods. He's like, how are you walking? We've done the microwave analogy again. You're like, yep, realize why we're here. We've already had this. What does he start doing for you?
He put me on progesterone and I went on a capsule.
Yep.
And he put me on estrogel, which is a gel that you pump onto your arm. Yep. And then I was on testosterone as well.
Yep.
So none of that was synthetic.
Yep, that was all bioidentical.
Exactly. And the options that I had was I could either insert the progesterone, you know, through my vagina, or take it orally. And the difference would be on how many doses I had because it gets absorbed in different ways.
Yes.
And then I originally just started off with 1 pump. And then the testosterone, it was a little, like, thing.
Tiny bit.
Yeah. And that was, I rubbed that on my thigh.
Yep.
And that wasn't a quick fix either. My body took a long time to adjust to all of that. Did things get better for a while? They did.
Yep. And that's probably when we met. That's when I think you just sort of started with him and I remember you saying you had felt a bit of a pickup. You were feeling a bit better.
I did. And I felt someone was listening to me. And I started to have faith that I would get better. At that stage of my journey, I had then moved to the Hunter Valley, and I was starting to train women of a similar age, and they were experiencing
the same symptoms.
Similar
it's
symptoms.
Not to your extent, and obviously not at your age.
Yeah. And I was really happy to recommend him. And I was like, you need to see this man. He can change your life. He'll help you get through your day. And once my symptoms had kind of started to normalize, then, obviously with age and then life experience and all that kind of thing happening, we all got through the COVID situation. And my hormones once again started changing.
Because you started getting night sweats again, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, I remember that.
I did. And they came thick and fast.
And had you had any follow-up blood tests or anything during this time? So nothing. We're not even monitoring how you're going in terms of how your hormones are looking. Are they still tracking? Should we adjust anything? Nothing's been monitored.
No. Yeah. So because I was now living in the Hunter Valley, the consultations were all over the phone, and it would kind of be adjusted according to what I was saying rather than having any bloods done.
Yeah. And as we all know, you can't, especially with perimenopause, you can't sort of test if you're in perimenopause. You can test if you're past menopause, but you can still test sort of, especially where you were at, that you didn't have any progesterone, you didn't have any estrogen, you didn't have any testosterone. So you could still test your levels just to see if they were tracking right or if they were too high or too low, because yours were actually all being produced pretty much by bioidentical hormone that you were either ingesting or putting onto your skin.
And it was at that stage that my husband, Jared, obviously it was really hard for him to understand what I was going through, and he's very empathetic in how I was feeling. But it wasn't until he started to actually witness these ridiculous night sweats that I was having.
Yes.
And when I show him again all the clumps of hair that started coming out in the shower and being so distressed about that, it wasn't until he could really be empathetic.
Yeah.
Obviously, he witnessed all the crying and all the moods and all that kind of stuff. But I think it all became more real when he saw
the physical
exactly effects that it was having on me.
Yeah.
And it was through him. He said to me, look, Sam, I really think you need to get another opinion on what's happening here, because things are getting adjusted a little bit. You might be getting another pump of this or less of that, or an increase of whatever you're still on, but you know better. But I was so scared to change the doctor at the time. I
can imagine.
Because I've been to so many previously.
And this is the best prior to this episode. That's the best you felt in years.
And this is the best I felt I was listened to in years.
Yeah.
And then I basically got a UTI.
Yes.
And septicemia.
They had said if you had gotten there any later, you potentially could have died of septicemia. Because it was that bad. You weren't lucid. You didn't know what was happening. And it was your husband that was very scared about what was going on, because you started to do all these very quirky things around the house. And you were kind of like, no, I'm fine. And you weren't fine. And that's actually a symptom of getting a major kidney infection and then getting septicemia. Yeah.
Yeah. One really scary ride. And this is the reason why I'm no longer with that professor anymore. It was a Friday, and once again, I had this nausea. And again, nausea to me is just common because I'm forever nauseous.
And you actually cancelled an appointment with me. And you never cancel. You're always there. And
I was on my way to see
you. And you felt nauseous.
And I felt And oh my God, I can't get GKs. I think I've got a stomach bug. And I actually had got in my car to come.
I know you had, yeah.
And then I turned round and went straight back home. And I was like, I need to get to bed. I called Jared and it was a Friday. He was on his way home. And I said, look, I'm going to bed. I really don't feel great. I think I'm getting a tummy bug.
Yeah. Don't come near me.
I comes back up then because what else could it be, right?
Yeah.
The Friday night, I slept, thought I'd sleep it off, got up on the Saturday morning, and our kids are with us every alternate weekend. And I went to the kitchen and I started throwing the pots and pans around, and Jared's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm making breakfast for the kids. And I was like, but we don't have the kids this weekend. And I think that's when he started noticing all these weird things that I started doing. Another one was we had got our puppy a couple of months earlier, and I started like looking all around for money and cash all around the house for the puppy. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm looking for money. We need to pay for Cecil. And he's like, Cecil cost enough. We've already paid for Cecil.
Yeah.
And then I just started not feeling well again throughout the day. I started now getting a few pain symptoms through my abdominal area. It was the time when Australian Open was on and Jared was watching the tennis. And I remember lying down and putting my head and resting on his lap. And the next minute I started digging on the ground, and he was like, what are you doing now? I said, I'm just emptying the dishwasher. And he was like, no, something's not right. I'm calling the doctor. So he did. He called Dr. Theodore, and they arrived 5 or 6 hours later, completely misdiagnosed me and told him that I had period pains.
God, so you're doing crazy shit, but apparently it's period pain. Do you even get your period anymore?
No, but then I live like 3-4 years.
What the hell? Right.
Yeah, now I've got period pains.
And that's making you completely non-lucid.
Yeah.
Your period pain.
I'm delusional.
That you don't, you're delusional, but it's period pain.
It's period pain.
Oh my God.
And so he gave me something for nausea and told him, let her sleep it off, she'll be fine tomorrow.
Oh my goodness. And could you even converse with the doctor properly?
I don't remember the doctor even being there. No.
And he could still tell you that you had period pain?
I have no recollection from Friday night for the next 6 days of my life after that. So by that stage, obviously everything was shutting down.
Yeah.
Going to my brain. All my organs were starting to shut down.
Surely you had a temperature.
I was.
And so, but that was period pain.
But that was all period pains. Yeah, that was all period pains.
Pretty sure that temperatures don't generally come with period pain.
On the Sunday morning, I got up and I opened the garage door for some reason. I just remember, well, I still don't remember doing this, but Jared said I just let out this massive scream, and he came running. And this poor guy, what had only been through that weekend, right? And he's like, what's going on? And I said, oh my God, there is a massive panther, a huge black panther in the garage. You've got it, you can't go in there. And he was like, right, you are going to hospital right now.
And I remember you telling me later he had told you that you fought him the whole way. You were like, I do not need to go to the hospital.
Me in hospitals, absolutely not.
Yeah,
I don't go to hospital. So I gave him a really hard time. And he was like, right, this is non-negotiable. You either get into the car right now, or I'm going to absolutely, like, literally tie you up and put you in the car, or get an ambulance. So you have no choice. And honestly, I remember nothing. I don't remember him getting me into emergency. Apparently, I couldn't even walk. They then just saw the state I was in and literally started doing every test under the sun.
Yeah.
I had a spinal tap, various blood tests, various scans, MRI, CT, the whole lot. And then I had severe hallucinations, probably lasted for about 3 or 4 days. And then I couldn't see, I couldn't taste, I couldn't smell, I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk. I had a catheter in me. I literally was like a vegetable lying on a bed. And the doctors were really concerned at that stage. As you mentioned, a specialist did say to Jared, if you would have got Sam here 12 hours any later, she wouldn't be alive. And that's pretty daunting.
And for people that don't know, sepsis is blood poisoning. Yours was from a UTI that had turned into a kidney infection, and then that had turned into sepsis.
My organs were like completely shutting down. It was my kidneys, it was my liver, it was my lungs. I was on oxygen, and then my brain, of course, had started becoming greatly affected.
Yes.
And that was a major concern as well.
Yeah.
And then I had that episode of delirium.
Yes, you did. That wasn't long after I'd seen you, because I'd seen you after you'd been in there for about a week. So you were much better when I went in and saw you. You just start walking and that. But you still had another episode of delirium. Yeah.
I remember that clearly. My kidney functions had started improving and everything was kind of on the way up after being told that I was literally on death's door. Like, okay, we're going to do this. I need to get out of this hospital. By then I'd been in there probably a good 6 or 7 days. And then boom, I just took this bad turn one night and had this episode of delirium. And the scary thing is that I remember bout of that so clearly, and yet my body was just so sick.
And that's scary when you think something's real and it's not, and you would feel like you're completely losing your mind, which essentially you are.
And it was a major ordeal. I remember them completely clearing the path in my room so that I wouldn't harm myself or anybody else. And then I started storming up and down the ward and thinking that I was in my management position once again and telling everyone how to do their jobs and shouting at the top of my voice at times and then saying, you need to be quiet, like this people here are really sick, this is intensive care. And then I just started to become that much more uncontrollable, and I was walking behind the nurse's reception area and trying to get on the computer. I was just being like absolutely unruly, and the next minute they brought in 2 security guards. And my sense of smell had also totally changed. I couldn't taste anything. Everything didn't smell right. And I just remember these 2 security guards coming at me. And because I worked in like the last 20 years or something, my response was, so they put the big boys in. I know about you big muscly boys. Anyway, the one guy came near me and I was just like, oh my God, you need a shower. And had no filter. No filter. I mean, some of the stuff that came out of my mouth was just not me. And empathetic and, nurturing. And I was just this absolute wild thing on the loose. And then it became an incident at the hospital. Yeah. They had to call the supervisor in charge and do incident reports because obviously the security guard were called. And then I just remember being dragged down the passageway and kicking and screaming, and then being put back into my room and on my bed. And all of a sudden I thought they were doing some muscle testing on me. And I just started having this major fight. Like one against, by that stage, there was 6 nurses, 2 security guards, and the doctor. And I had them all trying to pin me down on the bed. And I was throwing the kicks and the punches and the hooks, and I landed a good few on a few people. And yeah, the next minute I just remember, boom, being darted like a ball and being put to sleep. And then the next day I woke up and my body was that painful, like I felt like I'd been in an absolute pub fight, you know, like with 20 people, because that's how wild the night was. Like I tried to fight my way out of that situation as if it was my life depending on it.
But that would have been scary for you, because that in your head, that's all happening. That's real. And once again, this is all from a UTI. And after we've been to this conference, what have we learned about UTIs and vaginal estrogen? Like, that's pretty much all you need to avoid getting a UTI, perimenopausal or postmenopausal.
And that doesn't only sadden me, that makes me feel really angry, because the psychological effects that the UTI and the septicemia has had are massive.
It would be huge. Like you'd have PTSD from that, because one, you almost died. Secondly, you've had psychoses, which are real relived trauma because you believe that was all happening. And then you have to repair yourself for that. That took you months and months to get over. That wasn't just, okay, you're out of hospital and you're okay. That was months of rebuilding your strength and your immunity.
And that was me doing it by myself.
Yeah.
There was no support with that either.
Just gone through sepsis, you've almost died, and there's no support.
Zero.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe if I wasn't in a healthy-ish state, I mean, you've heard my symptoms, they haven't been great.
But you're a healthy person. You've always looked after yourself. You train well, you eat well. Your body was strong. Had you not been that strong, what could have happened?
I would never have recovered as quickly as I did.
Yeah.
And when I say as quickly as I did, I mean, I have struggled. Not only the physicality of getting stronger from that, because I was skin and bones, I went down to 41 kilos, but it's been overcoming that mental battle of, once again,
you feel like you've been pushed backwards health-wise. And also coming into gut bacteria, as we go through menopause, our gut bacteria changes. But to then be given so many antibiotics, IV, your gut bacteria would have been really messed with, which also has knock-on effects mentally, physically, getting that back into alliance. It's not just you walk out and everything's the same.
100%. And again, not once was that professionally spoken to me about.
Yeah.
If I wasn't in the wellness industry and fitness industry, no one's ever mentioned anything about gut bacteria to me, and ensuring that that's something that
trying to build that back
up. Absolutely.
Because you'll have GPs now say to you, you go on antibiotics, they're like, make sure you take a probiotic as well. I think it's 2 hours apart. But to then leave the hospital after having so many antibiotics in you, it's surprising that there's not something else out there to offer support to people to get well again.
No. And besides the whole nutritional support, the mental support.
Yeah.
Psychologically, and once again, I mean, you know me and my life a little bit deeper than a lot of people, and I have been through a lot where I am a strong person with a strong mind. But now I drive past that hospital if I have to go that way, and I'm an absolute wreck.
Yes.
My mum-in-law had to go into hospital suddenly and land up in that emergency room, and I was with her, and I was an absolute mess myself for days after that.
Yes. I remember when you came and helped me with my mum, and you were just like,
I couldn't do it.
I can't. I want to be here, but it's bringing back so much trauma, which is completely understandable. But where is that support for people that come out of life and death situations. And sepsis isn't uncommon. There's a World Sepsis Day. It is not something that we don't not know about. And we do know what the knock-on effects are. And it's surprising that there is nothing else beyond that, or that you weren't even put in contact with the sepsis organisation. Yeah.
And the scariest part is, once again, it's one of the effects of perimenopause.
Yeah, is the UTIs.
Like, mind-blowing.
It is. And nobody's talking about it. And I think you've got women trying to avoid going onto antibiotics all the time because they're getting UTIs. And then we've been to a talk where they've said, oh, the easiest thing you can do is have vaginal estrogen. And I think it was a 80% cure rate of reoccurring UTIs. And vaginal estrogen is not absorbed into the blood. You can have vaginal estrogen and not go on low-dose antibiotics. You know that my mum's in a home. If she gets a UTI, her mind, complete psychosis. And that is so common with dementia. For whatever reason, really affects the mind. And so you've got a lot of women in nursing homes that are on low-dose antibiotics all the time. Now, for someone with dementia, that's very hard to introduce vaginal estrogen, clearly. But for other women, or had they been given it a lot earlier, that would be in their normal and they wouldn't have to be on low-dose antibiotics. And this is something so natural. And we've just completely missed it. And we're just giving antibiotics. There's antibiotics resistant strains of everything now because we overprescribe them. And here's something that can just ease that. And also ease a whole lot of genitourinary symptoms as well.
Actually quite mind-blowing, and it's quite distressing that there's not more information out there and more help and more talk. And that's why podcasts like you doing now and everyone starting the conversation is such an important thing.
And the crazy thing is this isn't actually even the end of your story, because after all this, you start getting more symptoms. You're just about to get married. And then what happens?
So then I slowly recovered from the UTI and the sepsis, and we had set our wedding date. And obviously life was really busy, working and planning a wedding and everything else that life throws at you. And I started experiencing some bleeding symptoms when I went to the bathroom and passed urine. And I was like, what's going on here? You're like, happening.
Exactly.
And I was like, well, maybe it's just stress and my body's playing up with all these weird things at the moment. I don't know. So once again, it's more now self-diagnosis rather than going to doctors, because I've had such a poor experience up until now. But I know that something's not right. And then that was obviously a major trigger and sign of going, oh, what's happening? Then I started feeling so bad again. And the nausea started and the night sweat started and all those other wonderful symptoms that we've been speaking about all started hitting me once again. So I kind of had to suck it up for a couple of months because we had to get through the wedding. And a week after the wedding, it was just like I couldn't go on like this anymore. It was quite a worry. And I managed to get a referral from my doctor to see a gynecologist and went to have my consultation. And she had then requested a couple of tests, etc. Went back for another consultation, and she had said to me, look, I need you to have a biopsy and we need to go in and have a look around. Had the biopsy done. While she was doing the biopsy, she also removed a fibroid.
Yeah.
And then once I had slightly recovered from that surgery and procedure, I went back to see her again.
Yeah.
And get those results. And she said to me, look, there's no real option for you here. Firstly, you have to stop immediately taking all those hormones. So the progesterone, the testosterone, and the estrogen that I thought were doing me so much good, she said to me I had to stop immediately.
So that's like throwing you into another like menopause state. Like I just, gosh, she would have just been going, no, please.
So that had to be stopped immediately. And the reason for that was because it was fueling cancer cells.
Yeah.
So my choices were, I had two choices. And one was either I have a biopsy every 3 months and see where we at and how the pills are going, which is inevitable, basically. It's like you're going to get cancer, but we'll just keep doing the biopsies to check. Or you need to have a hysterectomy. We had a conversation about it, and at the end of that, she said to me, listen, it's really not like you have an option here. Like the hysterectomy is something that it will be eventual and it should be an emergency one. As far as I'm concerned, you need to have this done ASAP. Had the biopsy just after Christmas. And then the hysterectomy was done just a couple of weeks after that.
Because we're right in that holiday period where no one's available. It was just that perfect timing.
As usual.
And then, had you, prior to any of this, ever had a scan done of your uterus?
Not that I can remember.
So, through all of this, before you started hormones, when everyone's trying to work out what's going on, no one has thought, let's just scan your uterus, your ovaries, just do some proper internal examinations, because is there some fibroids already there because of what was happening with your symptoms?
So the only time that happened was when I went to the gynecologist.
That's incredible.
Prior to that, no.
I'm all for obviously basing decisions on what's happening emotionally, physically. However, with your case, you were so complicated. Everybody was so confused. I'm so surprised that nobody has said, let's just get some overall scanning here to make sure that nothing else is happening as well.
The dismissiveness, the unempathetic responses, and this is just something you're going to have to kind of ride the wave on kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Is pretty much what I got. And that's what I started to believe that had to happen. But like a big thing also for me was my joints were so sore. I remember at the time saying this to a particular doctor and they were like, well, maybe it's the start of arthritis. And I was like,
I feel like every woman over like 40 has been to the doctor going, oh, I've just got this weird joint pain. This, that, they do rheumatoid arthritis checks. They do all these checks. Do they go, oh, like maybe your estrogen's not at the right levels?
You never.
It's just crazy. They just don't even think about it.
No. And the joint pain was like also another thing which is really distressing because when you're a trainer and you have to move your body and demonstrate things and be out beat a lot.
You've always been like physically fit, flexible, strong. You can move your body in all different positions to lift weights and everything. And then all of a sudden everything's hurting. You start going, there is something seriously wrong in my body. There's something going on.
And I felt there was something seriously not right with my body. And after a while, you just start to think like, oh my God, am I hypochondriac? Is this just me? What's going on here?
I think too, what's unique about your symptoms and your experience is you've actually been put into pretty much medically induced menopause from the IVF and that experience there. And then you've not received any support for such a long time and then received some support, but not follow-up care about what was happening? Because you can still take an estrogen level test and go, oh, actually, maybe that's gotten a bit too high, Sam. Let's bring that dose down. I think it's something that still needs to be monitored.
But even now, since I've had my hysterectomy, I've been told that I don't need any form of hormone treatment.
Which is, as you know, we've been to the conferences. We know what's going on out there. Is so not right. Like, you know, what's happening to your bones, right?
One of the big messages that we got from a conference that we attended was, girls, you are the CEO of your body. You understand your body. You know when something's not right with your body. You keep asking questions. You demand answers. You change your doctors.
How do you find a doctor? And then it's so expensive. You can go to 2 specialists and you're like $1,500 to $2,000 after those 2 appointments. Not everybody can afford that.
A, not everyone can afford that. B, you can't even get into doctors.
No, you can't just change. Oh yeah, quick, let's just change to someone else. And when you're telling your whole story again, you're doing all the freaking tests again. And then you're kind of back to square one, because if they've got the same opinion, you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, I just need someone who actually understands.
It's really hard to get into just a normal GP. The wait lists are ridiculous. The wait times are ridiculous. A lot of GPs have closed their books. They don't take more people on. And the reluctancy of changing doctors is a scary thought, because am I ever going to get into another doctor, or what's going to happen?
I still go to some doctors that I'm on their books and they're the only ones I go to, because I'm like, oh God, where's this other doctor that I can go to and get actual real advice from? It is so hard.
Really, really hard, and it's really disheartening. And I think the more women that do push, these doctors need to upskill and educate themselves into how they can help and treat women of those ages and listen to their symptoms. Then it's not only the GPs, it's then the pharmacists.
Yes, because you had an incident where your pharmacist questioned you and wouldn't give you your script because she said you were having your testosterone because you work out.
Hello.
And you've got a doctor's script for it, and she's actually asking you why you're taking testosterone.
So then I was mortified, because I was then
once again, you're getting shamed and grilled.
And shamed by a pharmacist for taking a prescriptive hormone that was prescribed to me by a professor of hormones.
She's questioning the professor about his script, and you're having to fight against that. And somewhere in you would be going, oh, is this bad that I'm taking this? What's going on here? Why am I getting questioned like this?
You're always feeling like you're justifying yourself and your reason for how you're feeling. But these symptoms are real. And when they also told the statistics of the amount of women that are taking their own lives at early ages.
Key hormonal changes in a woman's life. How are we not researching that?
I think they can, and I think it's time for people to start taking notes and listening and really being more empathetic and understanding and creating some form of solution.
And so I know we digressed from your hysterectomy. So after you've had your hysterectomy, you've gone off all hormones. And I know you're pro-hormone, even though the hormones helped create something that we don't know. It could have been there. Something could have been underlying prior. Also, you weren't kind of monitored, especially for such a specialist case and someone obviously so young as well. But you are still open to being on hormones.
Well, particularly now after I went to that conference and heard the amazing doctors speak. Prior to that, I was once again just listening to the specialist that I went to, and that was take nothing. But I still know how I'm feeling.
Yes,
and that's not amazing.
Yeah.
So this whole vaginal estrogen, I'll be absolutely open to trying that. And, you know, it's got such fantastic backing by these doctors that are so passionate about that helping women. Now, I just turned 50 myself, so I want to make sure that I can stay as strong as possible, obviously doing what I can with my training and my nutrition.
Exactly.
But how else will I get estrogen into my body?
Exactly. Well, I mean, the vaginal estrogen, I think, isn't actually absorbed into your bloodstream. However, now that you've had a hysterectomy, you no longer have to take progesterone. So then that's like a whole other discussion to have, because it's like whether or not progesterone did something, or, you know, because you were so out of balance for so long, it could have been a whole lot of things happening there for you. It's such a hard space for women to be in, especially if we're complicated, because I know there's a lot of women out there that have had breast cancer and they're on their own journey of what they should and shouldn't do. And they want to speak to someone that's really educated about it, because there has been changes in the space about whether you can be on progesterone or estrogen or if you can't. And that's a really hard space to navigate for them as well. And I think it's super hard when you have a really specialist condition to then find the advice that you need as well.
And that's what I think is another important thing, like sharing good people for people to gain knowledge from and listen to, rather than just seeking all this advice and going on the rat wheel where you're just going round in a circle and watching all these clickbait people that are just sucking you in, but not giving you the correct information. And that's really disheartening, because you're very vulnerable. You're almost ready to try anything. You'll give your last dollar if you have to, but then, boom, you're not getting hit with the truth. So I think making sure that you do a bit of research on who you're listening to, follow the right people.
Yeah.
There's some really amazing, caring doctors, which, you know, we witnessed.
Kelly Caspert and Dr. Harvey.
Wonder.
You know, there are some amazing women in this space. But the problem is you can't get an appointment with them usually. So it's finding then those doctors that are following them, or keeping up with the research. And I know what Dr. Javier has said, that she's a gynecologist, and she said she gets, when you train, you get less than 6 hours training on perimenopause and postmenopause.
That absolutely, thank goodness I was sitting down, because honestly, I would have absolutely fallen flat on my face. That alone is just horrific.
You think you're going to your gynecologist for the best advice, and if they haven't actually kept up with what's happening in the world here, you're actually not getting advice. You're probably getting old advice, or it's advice about, we can take your uterus out, but it's not beyond that, or it's not beyond us procreating. I can deliver your baby, but I can't advise you on anything past that.
No. And there's nothing for women of our age and our contemporary to get that help and support that we need.
Exactly.
I really think that there's a massive journey that needs to happen, but I don't think that it needs to be sped up a little bit, because women are just crying out for help. They really are. And when it was mentioned that women are living for longer periods of time than men, but with a way lesser quality of life, that also hit home in a big way. And I'm sure it did for you too.
Exactly.
You know, going through your own experiences now, it's frightening, because dementia and Alzheimer's and all these real diseases out there that are happening.
It's what's led me.
Yeah.
It's what it has led me on such a big delve into hormones, with my mum being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, as you know, and she didn't take HRT because she believed it caused breast cancer. And she was having all these symptoms for quite a long time, memory issues, forgetting words. And now I've delved really into it. There's an amazing $50 million research going into Alzheimer's and HRT. And I think the doctor is Dr. Mosconi. She's written a few books on aging and Alzheimer's. And it's just scary that I just go, imagine if she did give herself the option. Nobody had said, oh, but actually if you go into HRT, it reduces your chances of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, like all these other things. It was all just like, oh no, you don't do that because that'll cause breast cancer, which that whole research is now being like debunked. It's also different. It's bioidentical hormones. Like there's so much more into all of that. But it does upset me that that option was taken off the table for her. And Alzheimer's is now going to be the biggest cause of death in females in Australia in the next few years. Now, if you go back to when I think there was time 20 years ago when 30% of the population or 38% of the population that were in menopause were taking HRT, you kind of go, okay, I wonder if the reason the rise is now is because those women who are now older missed out on that. They didn't get to take it. So now there's more women experiencing Alzheimer's. I don't know. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. But God, I know if someone said to me, okay, your risk of Alzheimer's or you've got a risk of this, well, one's treatable, one's not. Like, and I'm not taking away from anyone who has gone through a breast cancer diagnosis either. But when you find out that those studies were even incorrect, it just makes you even more angry.
Gosh, frightening and so mind-blowing and eye-opening. Another thing, my symptoms just in the last couple of months being diagnosed with high blood pressure and high cholesterol.
Yes.
And, you know.
That's what Michelle Bridges went through as well. She said, I'm high cholesterol. Like, what?
Exactly. And again, I had all these things thrown at me. Well, you're not really overweight, or you're this or you're that. Like, why do you got high cholesterol and why do you got high blood pressure?
And for all those people that don't know, all of those things now are linked to lack of estrogen and going through menopause.
So when I went to this conference a couple of weeks ago again, it was so mind-blowing for me because it was just like tick, tick, not like 3 ticks, not like 4 ticks.
It was like every tick, yeah.
15 ticks that I've ticked every box for.
Yeah. And then nobody could
not
give you
one
the health.
With my symptoms, with my diagnoses, with my high blood pressure, with my cholesterol. And it's almost been like a domino effect of symptoms that I've been getting for 16 years of my life, from the vertigo right through to everything else that we've been talking about today, with now blood pressure and the cholesterol, which I have to take tablets for.
And so you're getting that now since you've come off the hormones too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So you weren't getting that before when you were on the hormones?
No. So this has only happened since my
hysterectomy
within the last 4 or 5 months.
So since you've come off your estrogen, progesterone and testosterone, you now have high cholesterol and high blood pressure.
That's right. And when it was questioned how long I need to be on these types of medication for, I was told the rest of my life. It's been a horrendous, horrific, traumatic journey, but as I say, better, not better. And if my story can help just one girl or one woman out there to probe a bit more, to ask more questions, to know that she's not alone, to know that she deserves the answers, to know that it's probably an easy fix.
Yeah.
It's probably not as mad a journey and wild a journey as I've been.
But imagine if you started off with support from the beginning.
My life would be very different.
Exactly. It would look very different.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're very
welcome.
welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for providing this platform.
Oh, my pleasure.
It is such a vital platform, and I'm so passionate about sharing and hearing more of your guests that come onto your show.
Normalizing experiences, be it you've been through something medically or it could be emotionally, we're all on a journey, and I don't think women's issues are being spoken about enough. And at different stages of life and in different things that we're all having to experience.
And I guess the most refreshing thing is that we can all relate in some way or another.
Yeah.
When you do talk about things and you go, oh my goodness, that's me.
Yes, exactly. You start
like,
ticking things. You're like, wait, that happened to me. I had that happen. Yeah. And you can look into it and be more educated about it. Because unfortunately, we're at this space and this time at the moment where women haven't been researched enough over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And the research is coming, but it's not quite here yet. So it's in our best interest to be educated. Yeah. And to have some knowledge about what is and isn't normal.
To take control.
Exactly.
Take control. Be that CEO of your health. I love that.
Yes. Because I think forever we've kind of been told what the doctor says goes and you don't question them. And there was a real hierarchy relationship with your doctor. And that's changing. They're not better than you. They're human. They will make mistakes. But don't think that because they're a doctor, they're above you. You're supposed to be working together on your health.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest message. And I hope that that does start to happen.
Yeah.
Because as I say, I haven't experienced that myself. The more the medical system can work together, can listen. Obviously, when I experienced myself, that 11 days in hospital was a huge eye-opener. Lack of staff, lack of funding. These poor nurses and doctors rushed off their feet, etc. They're human. They're doing what they can. But at the same time, I think, as you mentioned earlier, with a lot of these things, if there was an onboarding process with things in the beginning, a lot of things could be prevented.
Use your nurses, use your nurse practitioners, have particular tests that go out first that you know you're going to have to order for a patient and for a consult when it comes to their hormones and what's happening. Just have those available first so you're not then having to go and do them all over again and then wait another 6 months for an appointment, because I think that's one of the most frustrating things. And then, of course, there might be other tests that they need to get. That is fine, but at least you've got the basis covered. Yeah, because I know for you and for me, that is one of the most frustrating things. I'm just going in there to get the test and then to come back. And
honestly, it's just a waiting game.
Exactly. Now, Sam, we ask our lovely guests to answer a question you pulled out from the teapot earlier today. Now, your question is, if your vagina could talk, what would it tell us about you?
It would say that I am a one strong lady. I am one determined lady who is very happy to share my experiences. I'm not afraid to talk, and that it's to be enjoyed and used.
Yes.
Yeah.
So utilize her.
Utilize her. Yeah. Stay wild.
I love it. Thank you, Sam. I can't wait to have you on again because I'm sure you'll come on and tell us some fitness advice.
I'd like to do that.
We will have you back again soon. Cool. Thanks, Sam. Till next time, my beautiful vaginas, water those lady gardens because they are worth it. Please note that this podcast is for entertainment purposes and informational purposes only. The content shared is not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for any medical concerns or before making any health-related decisions. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and guests, and it does not represent those of any medical organization or institution.